Hey friends, this is Karen with Blue Rooster Farm, and today we are going to be making this cute little computer sleeve tote. It has this wonderful ruffle and handles and this charming little pocket with the ruffle on it as well. It is lined and has enclosed seams, so there are no raw edges seen anywhere. This tote can be sized to fit any laptop or tablet that you may have. I am using a flexible foam stabilizer to keep whatever technology equipment I have inside there safe. And I've got double zippers. You can do double zippers or single zippers, but it works perfectly. And here's how my computer fits in it. I like my tote to fit my computer pretty tightly because that way it's not going to be sliding back and forth. Now I do leave quite a bit of room at the top, and that does allow me to put other things inside this tote. But as you can see on the sides, I've probably got a thumb's thickness on both sides of the computer, and then at the top a couple of inches. So it works just perfectly, but you can size yours any way you'd like. My laptop measures about 12 inches by 9 inches. Mine is an Apple MacBook Pro, so you'll need to measure your own device so that you can get a custom fit. Now, once you have your measurements for your device, you will need to select your fabric, and I've just chosen some vintage fabric, and this is a little bit of a canvasy fabric, so it's a little heavier, but you can use regular quilting cotton. That's what I used for my first one. And you're going to need to cut your fabric 4 inches wider than your device and 4.5 inches higher than your device. Cut 2 of your exterior fabric and 2 of your foam fabric. Now I'm using one-sided fusible foam, but you can just use regular foam and then pin-based, spray-based, or glue-based it to your fabric. And this is the Heat and Bond Versa foam, and it's one-sided fusible. We also have Pellin, and it is one-sided fusible. You just don't want two-sided. Now there are several brands of this foam, and I will add some links in the description box if you'd like to purchase some online. If you are using the single-sided fusible, you can determine the side that has the adhesive by the texture. It's a little shinier, and you're just going to put your fabric that you are using for the exterior of your tote on top of that shiny side face up. And you're going to do that with both pieces, and you're going to set it with an iron according to the manufacturer's directions. Once you've adhered your foam to your fabric, we want to do some quilting on this, and we have several different options. One of the options is to do diagonal sewing, and you could also add a diagonal the other direction to make cross hatches, and that's what I have done. You can also stitch up and down, or you can stitch straight lines across, or both. Now you can also follow outlines of different things on your fabric, or you could do the free motion quilting just with your machine. All of these are easy to do, and they will make it look really nice when it's finished. I'm going to do the crosshatch. Now, one thing that I like to use when I am making bags and totes is my walking foot. This foot's certainly not a necessity, but it does come in handy, and it has the walking feet on the foot, so it pulls the fabric at the top layer and the bottom layer at the same time. It also has this bar so that I only have to mark one line when I'm quilting and then use this bar to follow that line as I'm doing my straight line quilting. So these are really handy, and I'll put a link to the one I'm using for a low shank machine in the description box below. Once your fabric is quilted, now we need to trim it to the correct size for our tote. And we are going to take the original size of our device and add 3 inches to the width and 3.5 inches to the height. And that is going to give us the size of our cut that we need to make this tote. So we're taking off about 1/2 inch to an inch. When you quilt something, it shrinks up the fabric, and that's why we overcut it in the original cuttings. Our front and back pieces are now prepared to go into our tote. The next thing we need to work on is our pocket. And this is optional. If you don't want a pocket, you don't have to put one on. And so what you're going to need is you're going to need 2 pieces of fabric that are cut 5.5 inches by 7.5 inches. You will also need a piece of batting that is cut just a little bit larger, about an inch bigger than what your pocket size is. Now I am putting a pocket on mine, and because I really like this floral design and it's a big floral design, I don't want to take away from it. So I am adding a pocket that is fussy cut so that when I lay the pocket on, it looks like it blends right in. And so I've cut mine in a fussy cut way, and it's going to work just fine. Now, taking the piece of fabric that is for your pocket, the exterior piece, you are going to glue baste, or you can spray baste, or you can pin baste the batting to the back of your piece of pocket fabric. And I'll give this a nice press, and it will hold it in place, and then I can do some quilting on it. And I think I'm just going to do a quilt stitch like I did on my other tote here, where I just stitch vertical lines up and down. And here's what it looks like all quilted. And I used, instead of using my walking foot, I use this small little foot that looks like this because it has a grid on it, and I can do really close stitches really easily. And I'll put a link to this in the description box below as well. But it's handy for small spaced quilting. Now we're going to trim this pocket down, and all we're going to do is take off the batting and just make sure it's square. It may be just a little bit smaller than we started off with, but it should be very close since it's not that big of a piece of fabric. We didn't have as much shrinkage. And so just trim it nice and square and make sure you have the batting removed. So now let's add the ruffle to our pocket. And this is completely optional. If you don't want to add the ruffle, you don't have to. So we're going to take a fabric that is contrasting to our bag so that ruffle shows up nicely. And here's the fabric I'm using. You want to cut it at 1.5 inches by 14 plus inches, and you want to fold in those ends about 1/2 inch and press. You also want to press it long ways so that you have a double thickness of fabric. Now you can see that mine is a little over 14 inches, and that is fine. It'll just give it a fuller ruffle. The smaller amount of fabric you use, the looser your ruffle. Now I'm using my ruffler, and if you have one, you can certainly use yours, but I will show you how to make a ruffle by just gathering your seams. Here is how to make a ruffle without a ruffler foot. You take your sewing machine and you want to put it on the basting stitch, or the longest stitch that your machine can make, and you want to stitch 2 parallel lines in your seam allowance. Then you want to take and you want to pull the top 2 threads, one from each stitch, and you want to grasp it firmly and then pull your fabric, and as you pull you can see it's starting to ruffle. And I like to work mine to the middle and get it all about halfway on one side, and then I like to switch sides and do it the same on the other side. When you flip it, make sure you are staying on the same side that you had up earlier, and you want to take the same thread that you were pulling earlier. And I like to use my little stiletto there just to get a hold of the stitches, and that helps. And just continue pulling that until you have it 1 inch shorter than the width of your quilted pocket piece. Once you have your ruffle made, you are going to be pinning it to the top of your quilted pocket. So I have the right side of my pocket up, and I'm going to start a 1/2 of an inch away from that raw edge because I don't want my seam allowance to curl my ruffle in. And so I'm going to put a pin right there, and then I'm going to go to the other end, and again I'm going to go a 1/2 of an inch away from that edge. We're going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so whenever it's sewn, that ruffle will not be in that seam allowance. Now, if it doesn't fit correctly at this point, you can pull your threads and get it to line up perfectly. It'll just need to be either loosened or tightened. And then we're going to just put pins in it to hold it so it's nice and neat. And we're going to take the other cut that was for our pocket, and that's going to be our backing, and we're going to line it up with the right sides together. And you want to make sure when you do this that all 3 layers are even with that top edge. If you get it crooked, your ruffle will be crooked and it might show up pretty clearly on your bag. So just do it as neatly as you can, and I'm just using clips. They hold it really nicely. Now when I sew this, I'm going to make sure that I do not catch the edges of the ruffle in my seam allowance there. So I might be putting some pins in it, or I might use my stiletto to push it away when I'm stitching. But you just don't want to catch the ends in your seam allowance. I also like to match up the side edges and the bottom edges just to make sure my pocket isn't wonky. And now once I have it all ready like this, I am ready to take it to the sewing machine. I am going to stitch around the entire pocket a 1/4 inch away from the edge, and I'm going to leave a gap at the very bottom that's about 2 to 3 inches wide. So don't sew there. And I have sewn it, and I've left that opening at the bottom, and now I'm going to trim the corners just a little bit so that they don't have too much bulk in them. You do not want to cut over your stitches, so be very careful. There is quite a bit of bulk in mine because I have, like I said, a canvas, more of a canvas type of fabric. So then I'm going to flip it inside out really carefully, and I like to go from pull the corner first and then go and get the other corner and pull it out as well. And just be careful, you don't want to rip anything. And this is the moment that you see whether or not you did not get something in your stitches, or if something looks wonky, and hopefully it turns out really cute. And then you want to get something to poke your corners. I am just going to use my flamingo point turner, and it's by Flamingo Toes, and I'll put a link if I think of it in the description box below. But it's a handy one, and it's not so sharp that it pokes through your fabric. You do want to be really careful not to poke through your fabric. And so just get those corners all nice and pointed out. And I do want to add, if you happen to see some of your basting stitches in your ruffle, just use your seam ripper and remove those. They'll come out really easily. Then you want to fold your seam allowance into the pocket, making sure you have a 1/4 inch seam allowance so that it gets caught in your top stitch. You want to pin that, and then we're going to give this a really good press. Now we're ready to place our pocket onto the tote's front panel. And I have to line mine up according to the print of the flowers because mine is matching that flower pattern. But you can center yours, or you can set it a little bit down on your tote, however you like your pocket. Once you have your pocket placed where you'd like it, you want to take some pins and pin it down so it won't move while you're sewing it down. Now we're going to go to our sewing machine and we are going to top stitch the sides and the bottom of our pocket. Be sure you secure the top corners by back stitching a couple of times. And we have finished our pocket and it looks very nice. The inside is completely finished as well. That inner piece is facing the right side now. Now we're working on our outer ruffle. Before we add our ruffle, we are going to round the corners to make it easier to stitch that ruffle on. So what I do is I just find something rounded and I am just going to use my starch can. And I'm going to take it and put it on the bottom two corners and I am going to trace around. And then cut that. Then I'm going to fold my fabric in half and match it up with the other lower corner, and then I'll just trim right around that template so that I will have a matching corner. Then I can lay this piece on top of my other piece, making sure I have it the right side, and I can use this as a template as well. And now we have matching sides. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to find a zipper that will coordinate with our fabric. You can use white or cream, and recently I shared with you that I had purchased this from Amazon, and it has a whole bunch of different colors, and it's zipper by the yard. And we also have the little zipper pulls. So you can either use zipper by the yard or you can use a pre-made zipper as long as it is wider, just a little wider than our bag. And so I've picked out a couple of colors here that I think would look nice. And so I just need to choose between those colors. I ended up deciding to play it safe and just going with the cream that matches the background on my fabric. The others would be pretty, but I'm just playing it safe. So I'm also going to use zipper pulls the same color. And I'm going to trim my zipper so I have at least an inch hanging over each edge. Now if you're using the zippers on a roll, you do need to put your zipper pulls on, and it can be a little tricky. There are some gadgets that you can use, but I find that I can usually get it on without any problems. It might just take a few minutes, but you just need to get that pull on, and I like to put 2 pulls on mine. You can only do 1 if you want, but you just need to work it, and there's lots of videos out there on how to put those pulls on. Now we're going to get our pieces for our lining, and these lining pieces are the same size as your quilted sides of your tote. So they'll just be cut to that same size. And what we're going to do is we're going to round the corners on the lining pieces as well, and we can just do that by putting those two lining pieces together and then laying one of those side pieces on top. Then we can just draw around or cut around that corner, and we'll have those pieces rounded as well. To put the zipper on, we're going to take the side of the tote and we are going to put it face up, and then we're going to put the zipper centered on it face down on that top edge. And I'm just using clips here to put it in place. And I'm going to use a basting stitch and sew right across that top edge, less than a 1/4 inch from the edge. And I like to do it this way just because it allows my zipper to be sewn in a little more accurately and a little straighter. Then we are going to take one of our lining pieces and we are going to put it right sides together with the fabric and the zipper. And we are again going to clip that in place, making sure that the edges on both sides are lined up and the top is nice and straight and flush with the edge of the zipper and the panel. Then we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew with a zipper foot, if you have one. If not, you can do it without one, about a 1/4 inch away from that zipper. Once that's sewn, we are going to flip back our lining piece and we can take a look at our seam there and see if our zipper looks like it's nicely stitched and evenly stitched. And we're going to press this really good, making sure we don't have any pleats in that hem line or that seam line. And then we are going to take it and we are going to top stitch right below the seam that we just made. And there we have that top stitching done, and we're ready to add the back panel. So what we want to do is, with right sides up again, we are going to take the back panel and put it right side down, and we are going to put it and match it up with the top of that zipper. Now you want to be sure your sides are matching the other side of the tote so that your tote will come out nice and straight. And you want to make sure the top edge is matched up nicely too. And I'll just put a few clips on there to hold it in place. And what we want to do now is the same thing we did a while ago. Using a basting stitch on your sewing machine, stitch less than a 1/4 inch away from that top edge. And we have that basting stitch done right there. Then we are going to lay it so that the lining is faced up just like this. And you can see that's the side that has the pocket. And we are going to take our other lining piece and we are going to lay it with the right sides facing together and line up that top edge with the edge of the zipper. And again, we're going to make sure the sides are matching and we are going to clip or pin it. Now a lot of people don't do the basting stitch in between, they just put the 3 layers together, the quilted side, the lining, and the zipper, and sew them all at once, but I find I have better results when I do them separately. And I also think that this is a little more beginner friendly. So now after I get my last clip on, we're going to go to the sewing machine and using a regular stitch, sew about a 1/4 inch away from your zipper teeth. And we have that stitched on, and we want to fold it back and take a look and make sure it looks nice and straight. And then we're going to pull that other side so our zipper is between the 2 pieces, just like that. Now again, we want to press this right here really well and make sure we have all those pleats out of it, because those pleats can get caught in the zipper teeth if you don't get those out. So before I do the top stitch on this one, I will press well, and then I'll do the top stitch right next to that seam that we just made. And there we have our top stitch on right there, and it's looking good. And here's what it looks like on the back. So this is what yours should look like at this point. And if you were to want to add inner pockets to your lining, you would want to do that at this point or before. I did not add any pockets to my original tote that I made, but on this one, I'm not going to add a pocket in there, but I'm going to add a divider in there. So I'm going to take a piece of fabric that when folded in half is the same width as my bag, but it's about 3 inches shorter than the bag. So just whatever your height is, you'll want to make it about 3 inches shorter when it's folded in half, just like that. Now, if you've got a smaller one, it may be even less than 3 inches, but it's just whatever works for you. Now we've got to round the corners on this as well, so it will match up with our other pieces. So we'll do it the same way. Once you have that divider trimmed to fit, lay it on your fabric to make sure it fits up perfectly, and it should. And now we are going to take, and we're just going to do a top stitch right there on that fold. That way it'll just stay together. Now that we have that top stitch, we are just going to put it in place and then put a few pins, or you can use clips just to keep it where it needs to be. Now let's pull our tote over here, and I want to show you we have 2 D-rings right here, and that would be either for a strap that you would, like a shoulder strap, or to hang different things on it, like some pouches and stuff. And I am going to be making some different little pouches to hang on purses and totes, so that will be coming up in a video soon. So I'm taking 2 D-rings and also 2 pieces of fabric that are cut 4 inches by 3 inches. You are going to press them in half and then bring the outer edges to the center and then press in half again, just like I'm showing you here. When you do that, they should measure about 1 inch wide. Now we are going to take those and put them into the D-ring, and you can use whichever side looks good. And then we are going to match up the bottom edges, and we are going to take, and you can use your zipper foot, and go as close as you can to that metal bar with a seam. Do the same thing with the other one. And there's what they should look like when you have them stitched. So I'm going to set this up so that we can see exactly how we have this laid out. I'm going to take this divider off here for a second, and let's start right here. So we have both our lining pieces and we have our quilted pieces paired together. The lining is on the left and the quilted pieces are on the right. And I'm just going to make sure that that zipper up there is even, and we are going to be folding that zipper toward the quilted. So you want that to bulge toward the quilted fabric. Now we're going to put that divider piece back in it. So carefully line up the edges to make sure that it's all pieced together and everything's going to get into the seam. Then we want to bring the other lining piece over, and we're going to pin these 3 layers together. Just use your pins or your clips. Be be very careful to make sure all the edges are lined up, because if you don't get a edge caught into the seam allowance, you will have a hole in your lining. Okay, now that we have the lining together, now let's take a look at our front and back panels of our tote. Let's open this up. At this point, we are going to be layering our ruffle and our D-rings. We're going to start by putting our D-rings on our pouch, and you need to have the D-rings so they're facing in, and then you're going to let some of that tab hang out. I made it extra long just so that you had plenty to work with. Now I'm going to go about an inch down below the zipper, and so you can just mark your piece an inch down on both sides. And then just line up that top edge of your tab with that line. And then you can decide whether you want just the D-ring sticking out or if you want the tab and D-ring sticking out. I'm going to go about halfway. I'm going to have about half of the tab sticking out and then the rest of the D-ring. But you can decide. You've got plenty to work with there. Remember, the D-rings are being placed into the fabric, not hanging out, because we're going to be flipping this inside out. Now we're going to pin the ruffle on top of those clips and all around the edge of our tote. Now this ruffle is one piece of fabric that is 3 inches by twice the distance around the sides and the bottom of the tote. You do not have to finish off the edge of this ruffle like we did on the other one. It is going to be in the seam allowance, so we are just putting it outside of that seam allowance, and we are rounding the corner. So it'll be a gentle little rounded edge for our ruffle. So as you can see how I've laid it there. And we can put a clip or a pin to hold it in place. Just make sure that raw edge is hanging off the edge because that will be enclosed. And then we can just go along the edge and clip the edge and the ruffle together. Now, when you do pull your ruffle together when you're making it, you want it to be that distance around when you're finished. So you might need to adjust as you go, and that's okay. You can still pull those threads as long as you don't cut those threads. And if you need to at the end, if it's too long, you can just trim it off. Now when you go around the corners, just be careful that you give yourself enough of that ruffle to cover up the corner. And you can even pin the ruffles that are sticking out there down if you think they're going to get in your way. And you're going to keep going all the way around until you get to the top edge on the other side. Now I cut my ruffle longer than I needed to, so I'm going to have some extra, and that's just fine. I'm just going to go ahead and go the distance that I need to go and then bring that edge out past that edge of the fabric, and after I get it all put together I can trim it off. So now we've got the ruffle in place, we've got the D-rings in place, and everything's pinned. Now at this point you can just flip over the other side of the tote and sandwich the ruffle and the D-rings and then sew around the outside edge. But I like to go ahead and baste this while I can see it. That way I know I catch all of that ruffle and those D-rings in the seam. So I'm going to take it and do a basting stitch. Now the ruffle and the D-rings are all basted down, and you can just check it and make sure everything has been caught correctly and nothing looks funky. Right now it's real easy to rip out a basting stitch and redo it, or a portion of it, but it's harder when you've got it all sandwiched together. So now I'm just going to trim off that excess ruffle, and I'm also going to cut the tabs of the D-ring even with the edge of the fabric. And so that's quite a thick piece right there, so just do that carefully. And then we have just the D-ring tab and a little bit of ruffle on that side. Okay, now we're going to flip it back over, and again just check to make sure everything looks good. And now we are going to sandwich it between the two quilted pieces of the tote. And we can use clips and clip this together. And we don't have to be quite as picky now because we've already got it basted down. Now when tucking the zipper in, I like to push the excess part of the zipper, like the teeth, toward the quilted fabric. And once we have that all clipped together, just make sure you have all of your lining pieces still lined up and pinned together. And make sure that that inside divider is laying flat. Sometimes when we move a lot of stuff, it gets kind of curled up in there, so be sure that it's still laying flat. Now, one thing I almost forgot to do is put the tag in and open my zipper. So I'm going to take out a few pins and I'm just going to stick my hand in there. And we want to open that zipper so that at least we can get our hand through it, and that way we can open it wider later on, because you do need to be able to turn it inside out. And so if your zipper is a really nice zipper, sometimes they don't open from the other side. Now, one thing I am going to do with this tote, I am going to put a little tag in it, and this is just one that I shared with you probably around the springtime, maybe around Valentine's Day or something. And when you put a tag in, you need to make sure that it is inside, facing the inside. It should, the raw edges should be hanging out, but the tag is actually inside that liner. And so I'm just going to put it in there, making sure it's the right direction, and then just pinning it down. I hope you noticed that I did put it above that divider. And now we are ready to stitch all around the outside of this tote, except at the bottom of our lining pieces. You want to leave 5 or 6 inches right there open. Now I just want to share with you, when I was sewing around the quilted part with the ruffle on it, I was doing a pretty proud 1/4 inch, probably about 3/8 inch seam allowance. But when I got to my lining, I kind of angled in and did a wider stitch, and it was probably about 1/2 of an inch, and that way it will fit a little bit better inside. And as you can see, I just cut the zipper tabs off because they should be good. I also made sure that I back stitched a couple times on those zippers because that's going to get some pull. And now I am just kind of cutting little notches in that corner where it's rounded there, because that's pretty thick and it'll help my corners pop out a little bit better. Do not cut through your seam though. And you can do the same thing on your lining there, just trimming little slits just to make that not pucker. And now is the moment of truth. We are going to turn this inside out. And I like to do it by grabbing the farthest away corner and pulling it through. And just be gentle and take your time. And then I grab the other corner and bring it through the hole too. And then we can gently pull it all the way out. This is always the part that I like. It's like, okay, I can't wait to see what it looks like. Once we have it pulled inside out or right side out, now we're checking to see if everything looks like it's still together, pulling out those corners. It's nice with the ruffle because you don't have to actually stick something in there. You can pull that ruffle and it pulls it out. And I think it's looking really good. Just check where the zipper is meeting the edge. And then we still have that hole at the bottom of our lining. So we're going to straighten up our lining, and there's our divider right there. Now on the lining, you can use your point turner and push those points out. But actually, once we get it turned back in, it's going to go the other way, so it's okay. But you'll need it pointed out when you're closing in that seam. But we're going to just make sure it fits okay, and so we're pushing it back in like that and making sure that everything's fitting in good shape. Now, if you notice your lining is too big, you can always turn it back inside out and then just make a little bit bigger seam allowance on just the lining. But I think mine turned out just right. And so at this point right here, it is looking good. You're going to also want to check your ruffle, and if you see any of those basting stitches on your ruffle, just take your seam ripper and they'll come out really easily. And just pull those out. That way your ruffle will look nice and clean. And at this point, you probably want to take your device and place it inside and make sure everything fits. Cross your fingers. And you can see the divider right there. I can place papers and things, and that way they won't scuff up or mess up my device. So that fits nice. And now the only thing we have to do before we put our handles on is to close up that gap in our seam allowance on our lining. And we're just going to line up that seam allowance, making sure we have enough turned in so that when we do the little top stitch there, it will all be caught and we won't see any of that raw edge. And you can pin this, whatever you need to do, clip it, and just sew a top stitch right across the bottom there. And that's all closed in. And so now we're just going to flip that back inside the tote. And there's the tag, and you can see that it goes the correct direction. So we are just going to make sure it is all placed inside and smooth. And once we have it nicely placed in there, we are going to make the carrying straps. So let's take a look at the original tote here, and you can see that we have two straps, and I have attached them on the outside just like that. So that's what we're going to do with this one. And I'm using the same fabric that I used for my ruffle, and I'm cutting two straps that are 4 inches by 20 inches, and I'm cutting 2 pieces of batting, and they are 3/4 inch by 19 inches. So I am going to take and fold in about 1/2 inch the outside edges of both straps, and then I fold it in half, and then I meet the edges to the center, and then I press the pieces together to make a nice enclosed strap. But I'm going to add a little bit of batting to give it a little bit of thickness and just to make it look nicer. So I'm just going to put that batting on one of those fold areas. There's two in the center, and you can just put it on one of them and then just cover it up like that. And then fold it together again so everything's enclosed, and then pin or clip in place. And you're going to clip it all the way down. You're going to do the same thing with the other strap. Then we're going to take both of our finished straps and take it to our sewing machine, and we're going to do an edge stitch all the way around. And there's our straps, and they are ready to attach to our tote. Now, depending on the size of your tote will depend on where you want to place your straps. Now, I can just go ahead and line mine up with my other one, but I also noticed that I'd like to have my straps lined up with the outside edges of my pocket, and that's pretty much where my other ones are. Now, for your reference, I am letting mine hang down about 1 3/4 inch from the top of the tote seam right there. But again, according to the size of your device, yours might be different. And as you can see, the outside edge of my pocket is lined up with the outside edge of the strap. And so that's how I'm setting mine. And you do want to make sure they're on there so that they won't move when you take it to your sewing machine. And again, I'm measuring them to keep them the same on both sides. Now the handles are actually optional as well. If you just want a computer sleeve, just leave the handles off. That's perfectly fine too. But I do like to have the carrying straps, and I think that will be very handy. Now, I didn't say, I don't believe, when we were putting the ruffle on, but you could do this same tote without the ruffle as well if you wanted to make it a very basic one. I have made computer sleeves for both of my sons using a masculine fabric and leaving the handles and the ruffle and the pocket off. It's just a basic computer sleeve, but it protects their computers, especially when they were in college. So that's an option as well. Now, as you see here, when I'm putting these handles on, I want to make sure they're going straight up and down. If they go crooked, it looks pretty obvious when you have your bag complete. So do make sure they are going nice and square to the top. Now, before you sew them on, check and make sure the tops of them are even as well and they're not twisted. And what we're going to do is we are going to stitch around the base of that handle and just following the seam allowance. I just stitch on top of the seam allowance a rectangle, and then I put a cross in the middle, and I'll show you what that looks like here on some paper. Okay, here are the straps, and what I do is I go across the top, then I follow the seam on the bottom and the sides, then I go across the bottom again, I cross back up, and then go across the top again, and that is a very secure strap. And here's how it looks on the one that I've already made, and that's what we're going to do to secure these on. And you may find that turning your bag inside out makes it a little easier sewing those on. And here it is all finished. The handles are attached, and inside you can see the stitches. One thing I should have done, and I didn't think about it at the time, I should have used a cream color thread for the spool and a red thread for the bobbin, and that way those stitches would not stand out as much. Now both zippers, we can pull them together in the center. And here I have a charm that has a pink colored quilt block. And I could either attach it on the side here, or I can put it on as a zipper pull. And I could put it on both of them if I want to keep the zippers closed. Like that. And that looks really nice. Now you could add different kinds of zipper pulls. You can add different kinds of things on the side. I am going to show you how to make a couple of different pouches to put on it that will make it even more useful. And this would be like a key ring that you could attach to it as well. Just like that, and have your keys on it or anything else that you want hanging off. And so let's look at both of our totes. Here they are together, and I just don't know which one is my favorite. I love them both. Let me know which colorway you prefer in the comments below. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you are able to make a tote of your own. These are a lot of fun, and I think they look really nice. So if you are not a subscriber and you enjoyed my video, please consider subscribing. I would appreciate that. Also, don't forget to like, and that's just that thumbs up button underneath the video. Share this video, and also please comment. That helps the algorithms and helps push my videos out further. So I hope you have a really great week, and I hope to see you back here next time. Bye-bye.